Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
I'm Megan.
Shake our gree Megan. All right. And squeaky
So quiet that time. Yes. Okay, and I'm stroking all the things.
All the kangaroo sacks.
Bones and
a
Freddie
listener
and
sent us a Instagram video of apparently they make dog toys out of kangaroo scrotums as well.
I'm just not surprised.
I thought
those poor giant hopping deer.
I know, and that the dog was
walking around sackless.
Dog was having a great time with it,
okay,
though. So
right.
I mean, nature.
It's just like you neuter him and then give him this to play with.
It's the circle of life. Can't have your nuts anymore, but here's kangaroo.
Something to chew on.
Mm-hmm.
I know how he feels.
Are you ready for part 2
of
the Sylvia Likens case? And it is
awful.
This is gnarly.
Okay, I'm
guys.
ready.
This is a gnarly, detailed episode. So if you have not listened to part 1, go back to the previous episode. I think it's 302 is what our man. We're, by the way, 300 general audience episodes. We didn't even talk about it when it was happening.
I know people congratulated us though because we literally lost track. We're sorry.
Yeah. We just we keep plugging away each week and. Yeah, this is episode 303. Congratulations to us.
Happy
anniversary. I mean, our Patreon episodes, we do, if you guys don't know, we do 5 bonus episodes a month. So technically we have done way more than 300 some episodes. There are hundreds.
1,000.
Yeah.
There's like 900 or something crazy like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of bonus content that you could binge if you want more of us or you have some hard times coming up and you need something to disassociate with. Join for a little while and binge, I mean, hey, there you go.
We've spent many hours of our lives now into this.
We have. We really, really have. And we have got such a wonderful Patreon following. Like, just shout out to them. They get, these 2 parts, they get both parts right away. They get all the exclusive content
and
extra fun engagement with us.
We love and adopt strays also. And so you guys become our little friends.
Yes.
We love our Facebook friends we actually talk to people and I still can't believe how many people will message with a suggestion and when you respond they're just like, oh my god,
I can't believe you really
messaged back. Yes. I'm like, well, yeah, 1, I'm not an asshole, and 2, we don't employ a publisher or any type of a PR person, and
this is
do this for fun.
It's our baby. This is our business, our baby. We don't trust it to anybody else but ourselves. And we also have built a wonderful community that way.
So thank you guys.
Yes.
And if you haven't joined Patreon yet, I just highly recommend you give it a try at least once so you can see what you're missing out on. And if not, go back to your regular
and if you hate it,
content.
Yeah. And if you hate it, you can totally cancel.
And you might because...
we're not for everybody.
We get a little unhinged in the Patreons.
We do.
Group, so.
We're definitely a different
vibe. And we exposed you to more Brain Bath Jason, who, if we told you at the end of the last episode, is fine. He had a family event, and will be back to record with us probably the next time.
Yeah. Yep. Probably. So, okay, on to part 2. And here we go. Remember I left you where I had just introduced you to Sylvia and Jenny Likens.
And they were going to spend the night at Gert's house.
They are. They're going to spend the night at Gert's house because Gert's oldest 17-year-old pregnant daughter, Paula, although no one knows she's pregnant except for the family. Paula has 6 other siblings living in that house with Gert. And so their first night there, this is their first night there. That's where we're picking up. These girls, their mother was arrested for shoplifting. They had spent all night on a bus leaving their father because he was being abusive. And so mom wakes these 2 girls up in the middle of the night and says, I can't take anymore. We got to get out of here. They get on a bus. They run out of money. and which is why she was caught shoplifting, because she was just trying to feed all of them.
And then you have a 16 and a 15-year-old left alone on the streets
Of Indianapolis. Indiana. So that's where we are. And the first night in the Baniszewski home, the Likens girls sleep in Paula's bed. And they're so worn out from the trauma of being ripped from their own beds the night before and spending the night on a dirty bus and their mom getting arrested that they sleep until almost noon the next day, until a pounding at the door woke them. Gert was awoken too because she was, of course, still in her nightgown, dirty, not washed, depressive state. She opens the door expecting to find a salesman, and instead she's face to face with Lester Likens and Darlene McGuire. Remember, Darlene was the teenager that introduced Paula to the Likens girls.
Okay.
Lester had been called when his wife was put in jail for theft, so he made the trip from Illinois to Indianapolis in search of his daughters and to get his wife Elizabeth, or Betty, as she went by, Frances Likens, out of jail. Sylvia was the third of 5 children born to carnival workers Lester Cecile Likens and his wife Elizabeth Betty Frances. She was born between 2 sets of fraternal twins. There was Daniel and Diana that are 2 years older than Sylvia, so they're 18. Then there's Benny and Jenny, who were 1 year younger. Jenny Likens suffered from polio, causing one of her legs to be weaker than the other. She was afflicted with a notable limp and had to wear steel braces on her legs. Lester and Betty's marriage was unstable. They often sold candy, beer, and soda at carnival stands around Indiana throughout the summer, moving frequently, and regularly experiencing severe financial difficulties. Now, the Likens' sons regularly traveled with them in order to assist with the carnival jobs. But Sylvia and Jenny were discouraged from doing the same out of concern for their safety and for their education. As a result, both sisters frequently stayed with their relatives, often their grandmother. In her teenage years, Sylvia Likens occasionally earned spending money by babysitting, running errands, and performing ironing chores for friends and neighbors, often giving her mother part of her earnings, to help them all have ends meet. She had been described as a friendly, confident, and lively girl with long, wavy, light brown hair extending below her shoulders, and was known as Cookie to her friends.
Okay.
That was her cute nickname. The reality is, when Betty woke the girls from their bed to leave their father, Sylvia was 16. She didn't have to go. She could have left and made her own way. Instead, she went along, though, because she didn't want to leave her younger, slightly disabled sister, Jenny. Well, on the doorstep of Gert, Lester explains that all the paperwork has been drawn up to release his wife from jail. They've reconciled from the other night. And all is well. They are carnival workers, and they make good money, but caring for their 2 daughters has been difficult because that's no life for virtuous ladies. So, an arrangement is made between Mr. Likens and Gert, who seems to collect children, by the way.
I see this.
They would send $20 a week to Gert if Jenny and Sylvia are allowed to stay and be cared for. For reference, Gert's rent was $55 a month.
Okay.
So $20 a week would supply this chain smoker with all of her cigs that she could ever want, and she's still going to be able to make rent.
Yeah.
$20 a week is a lot.
She's making rent and
getting all of her cigs.
Getting her cigs. Okay.
Yep. Mr. Likens had never stepped foot in the house. He did not see the filth. He did not see the lack of food. He didn't see the squalor. To know how many people were living there and know and realize that there weren't enough beds for even half of them as it is. He was all too happy to have an arrangement made for 2 less problems in his own life. Paula was making a big show of excitement, telling the girls that they were now going to be sisters. The Baniszewski children were not physically abused by their mother, but there was a hierarchy to the order of the family. With Paula and Stephanie being the oldest, they, of course, had the lion's share of control over the younger children. They all had friends and boyfriends that came over to the house, And those children also had a form of social dominance in this household. And Gert's not supervising anything. If she is out of her room, then she was in the living room being friends with these teens because she was never able to secure friends of her own age ever. So she's pretending just to be friends with all of these. She's a 37-year-old woman.
She had to give birth to her friends.
Yeah. She has no adult friends, and she is relating to these children because she's still a child herself, emotionally. She does, however, want to keep some kind of reputation in the community. So she makes a point of taking all the children to church every Sunday and to any events that it held during the week. She knew that people are less likely to speak sourly of them if they were church-going folk. But it's all for show, of course. Not to mention the fact, I'm going to throw this out there, you guys, there is a potluck at these churches. This was free food.
She could feed all of these kids.
Yep. She also did not let the kids miss school for the same reasons.
Truancy.
Yep.
She didn't want anyone knocking on her door.
Well, in the 60s.
Well, they probably didn't give a shit.
Yeah. But the show of it all, right? They go to church, they go to school, plus there's food.
At school, yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to trigger alert for abuse, and it really doesn't stop until the palate chasing brain bath at the end.
So if you can't handle child abuse, you just heard the rest of the story.
Yeah. The first beating for Jenny and Sylvia came just a week after they had been invited to live with Gert, when the first payment was delayed. The girls were stripped down naked on their bottoms, and they were beat bloody with a tree branch that cut and bruised them. This was done with the help of Paula, who threw Sylvia down and held her down. These are quotes from Gert. Your no good lying rat of a father promised me that he would pay his way. It's been a week, and I haven't seen a goddamn penny from him. I've been feeding you and washing you and putting a roof over your head, raising you right, and that bastard hasn't even sent me a measly $1. $20 a week, that's what we agreed. $20, a pittance, to keep his darling daughters safe and well. Well, you aren't going to be safe and well. Not if I ain't going to get my $20. Do you bitches hear me? If he don't pay, you get beat. End quote. She became so wild in her fit of rage that she actually scraped Paula's knuckles with one of the blows and didn't pull herself out of this rage until Paula yelled "Mom" after she had been struck. Then she told the girls that they would get beat like that every day that a payment was late. The check came later that same morning. It had been delayed one day at the state lines. There was just some delay with the postal workers.
Still is.
Mm-hmm. The girls could barely walk. The other children in the household seemed to be reveling in their pain. Paula was even smug about it. This is not a world that Sylvia and Jenny are accustomed to. Somehow Sylvia still felt sorry for these children because she knows that there's a better way to live, and she has. So she still has sympathy for them. The Likens girls knew that if they found pop cans, they could be returned for money, right? So they did this often, and they bought candy with it. It was Sylvia who insisted that they save some of the candy for the other children in the house. When Gert saw them handing it out to them, she flew into a fury about what a sin stealing is. Despite them explaining that they'd paid for it, Gert refused to believe them. This time, Paula and Stephanie both watched as Sylvia was stripped bare-bottomed and beaten with a wooden spoon while Gert yelled, "Thief and liar." She put Jenny in an impossible place because Jenny had just watched her sister explain that they paid for the candy, and she watched Gert refuse to believe her and then get beat. So when Paula turned on Jenny, grabbing her by the ponytail and, quote, gave her a chance to tell the truth, Jenny lied and agreed with Gert and said they stole it, not knowing what else to do. That was self-preservation. That is what you do, Jenny, because if they wouldn't have believed you if you had told the truth, and you would have got beat too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this resulted in Gert slapping Sylvia on the back with a victory, saying, "I knew you were a nasty little liar." Something you guys should know, Sylvia is very pretty. Gert doesn't like that.
All right. Prettier than her girls.
100%. Yes. Gert was just as suddenly calm as she was angry. And she told her that if she ever lies to her again, it'll be the last time. And she called her a filthy little bitch, then strolled out of the room with Paula shaking her head like Paula was so ashamed of these girls. Sylvia and Jenny just tried to stay invisible as much as possible, as you can imagine. I mean, at this point in time, they have now been beaten twice. They don't know how to behave. They don't know what's safe and what's not. So they do want to pretend like they're not there.
They're just
be invisible.
existing and still feeling it out. Probably thinking, how the hell do we tell our parents what's going on?
Right. And here's the thing. There's not only Gert's 7 children in this house, but it's all of their school friends and boyfriends too. This house was the teen hangout where parents let their kids go simply so they would not have to have teens in their own home. And Gert didn't care because from what I can tell, Gert didn't give a shit about anything. And mentally, teens were the only people that she was capable of relating to. As Sylvia and Jenny are trying to remain invisible, they are also literally becoming invisible. There isn't a lot of food in the house, so they are noticeably losing weight. At one of the church functions, the local Reverend Julian, was much for gentle. He was gentle in his sermons, much more gentle than what Sylvia and Jenny were used to, because traveling on the road with the carnival, they were used to the fire and brimstone type of reverends,
Sure.
right? So hearing Reverend Julian be just softer in his approach and how he, maintained his flock and whatnot was a nice change for them.
So they enjoy going to church.
They do. Reverend Julian approached Sylvia at a church function with extra food and snuck her an extra sweet treat. Both Jenny and Sylvia were noticeably eating a lot at this church function because they did not know when the next time would be that they'd get to eat. Now, it was not done to disgrace Gert. It was done for survival. And because the other children of the household had not informed them of the way that it is, of the way that you have to be casual about your many trips to the potluck line during church events like they had learned. So you can imagine the fury that night when they came home and Gert hears from Stephanie and Paula how the girls had acted. Sylvia was called down, and I'm going to spare you the very detailed description of what happens and just summarize here. But Gert takes stale bread and a cold hot dog out of a jar in the fridge, and she smothers it with ketchup and mustard, and she force feeds it down Sylvia's throat. This causes Sylvia to vomit all over the kitchen floor. The kitchen floor that had never been cleaned. It was caked in dirt and filth. Gert makes her not only finish the rest of the hot dog, but also the vomit on the dirty floor as well. Mm-hmm. Perhaps just as bad was the bizarre thing that she was screaming in her face. She was screaming that she was a disgusting pig, that she would lose that perfect body, and that no man would ever want her because she was going to eat so much that she was going to get fat. It's in Gert's rants that you can hear her psychosis for sure. Things like, quote, "Why did you do it, Sylvie? Why are you ruining that tight little body? No man is going to want you if you're fat. You'll end up all alone. You're going to end up all alone in a house full of ungrateful little bastards that shame you every chance they get."
Little self-reflection here.
Uh-huh. "You are going to be hideous and bloated. You are going to be so fat that people laugh at you when they see you waddling down the street. Is that what you want, you rancid little bitch? You want to ruin your perfect little body stuffing your face." End quote. She carries on about what a pig she is before she finally releases her to clean up. The other kids, not Jenny of course, thought it was funny and spent the next days humiliating her with making pig noises and telling everyone at school about her eating her own vomit. This was done because Gert felt that Jenny and Sylvie were making pigs of themselves at the church event to shame her, okay, to tell on her for not feeding them. Mr. and Mrs. Likens wanted to come visit their daughters, and Gert was too sly to allow this, so she arranges for them to meet at a park. She loads all of the family up on a bus, and they go, so the girls' parents can't see the filth that they're living in. As you can expect, she put fear into the girls to lie about how they're being treated. Lester and Betty took notice to their weight loss of the girls right away. Gert, of course, had a backup lie for it. She told them that the girls had taken up a diet to which they were watching their daughters' faces for confirmation, and the girls needed to play the part. Betty could tell something was wrong and whispered to Sylvie, asking if she was okay. Gert caught this, interjected, and said, "Our little Sylvie is just shy because all the boys' attention she has been attracting with her new body." To end the visit, they hugged, and Lester and Betty handed over an entire month's pay up front. This would be the last time that they hugged their daughter, Sylvia. They also mentioned letters that they had been writing the girls. Letters that Gert never gave them, of course, and Sylvia is now figuring out they've been writing, and Gert's been intercepting them. On the bus ride home, Gert praised the girls for how well they had done. She even pulled Sylvia in for hugs and pets, calling her a good girl and telling her she would not let the boys ruin her because she was such a good girl.
Oh my God. She is just, she sees her in Sylvia.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And she hates herself. So she's going to take all that self-hate and take it out on this beautiful young lady, just like she used to be.
Yeah. This bipolar kind of behavior is exactly the emotional roller coaster that drove the children's father, John, away. But in this moment, Sylvia was just young and naive enough to believe it. She spent the next few weeks lulling the girls into a false sense of security with one of her emotional highs. She was in a good mood, so she was friends to everyone, even making the girls feel like they were a part of the family, as she often would. Gert would hang out in the living room with all the teens and engage in inappropriate conversation with them all. The teens started to talk about how far sexually they had went. Sylvia, wanting to be a part of the group and feeling that false sense of security, because things had been going well, admitted to kissing a boy when she was younger, when she lived in Illinois. And she expected to get the same form of smile, laughter, and praise in Gert's eyes as all the others had been. Gert is sitting there talking to these teenagers that range in ages, you guys, of like 13 to 17 about sex, by the way. So she was also trying to impress Paula, who was sitting there pregnant, and everyone knows it, but no one's talking about it during this conversation, by the way. This admission of Sylvia kissing a boy in Illinois sets Gert off. This is the turning point. The real bad turning point. She immediately flips a switch. She calls her a whore. She drags her to the floor, forces her legs open, and she kicks her repeatedly in the crotch over and over.
Oh my God.
Then,
and this is in front of all the kids?
Then she tells the boys that are there to hold her legs open because she's getting too worn out and tired to hold them. So they do, so that she can continue to kick her. She is carrying on about how dirty women are, how God hates women, and he has a right to because they are nothing but filthy whores, and that God loves men more, and he should because they're better. She rattles on during this bizarre manic episode, all while kicking and inflicting pain directly to Sylvia's pelvic region. One of her kicks go astray as she's tiring, and she hits one of the boys' hands that are holding up a leg, and the weight of her leg falls, causing the boy to release her leg. And Sylvia immediately coils into a ball where Gert continues to kick her before finally stopping and telling her that God hates whores and that she's a godly woman, so she hates whores too. And everyone in the house are God's children, and they should hate whores like her as well. So she lets her know that she's no longer allowed to sit in any chairs in the house because of the poison that the poison from men that would be oozing out of a whore's body like hers. And she makes it clear to the others that she's not allowed on the furniture.
Like a dog.
Stunned, when she painfully got up from this episode, she was in so much pain that not only was she moaning terribly because it's the only way that pain could escape is through her mouth, but she reached for the nearest chair out of habit. I mean, I really don't know that she knew exactly what she was doing at this point in time. She'd been so severely beaten. But Gert got there first and moved it out from under her. She fell to the floor, and Gert reiterated that she's not allowed on the furniture because whores are unfit for chairs. She was, of course, in terrible pain. she could not sit at the school in her school desk the next day, and she was angry. So she decided to retaliate. So she spread a rumor that Paula and Stephanie were paid by men to have sex with them, and that's how they helped make their way.
It might be true.
And it very well might be true. It might not have been a rumor at all.
They may have confided all of this in each other.
For sure. And I know that
and
they
Paula's
were.
pregnant.
Paula's pregnant. Yep. Now, as I said in episode 1, I don't know that was really happening, but it wouldn't surprise me given the poverty that this family is in. So she knew that Gert's own reputation was already sullied, but she also knew that going after the reputation of her precious daughters, that's how she could hit Gert where it hurt.
Okay.
Right? So that's what she did.
Yeah, I'm not much liking Paula either.
Oh, fuck Paula.
Yeah, I'm like,
No.
I understand that some of these children, you grow up a certain way. There might be an innocence piece there, but how come nobody is asking for help? How come nobody is recognizing this?
You just hold that thought, because there are a lot of people that get held accountable for what happens to this young woman.
Okay, good.
Rightfully so. So this is the true beginning of the end. The rumor makes it back to Gert quickly because one 15-year-old, very disturbing child named Coy Hubbard. I will tell you right off the bat, it doesn't matter that he's 15. We can start hating him right now. Okay? Coy had a crush on Stephanie. So he was really upset to hear this rumor that Stephanie was sleeping with men for money, because he was fantasizing about Stephanie.
Right.
Okay?
He's one of the boys that comes to the house.
Yes, he's a frequenter of the unsupervised household of Gertrude, the worst Trude, which I think is what we should just call her from now on.
I'm sticking with sludge.
Yeah. Gertrude, the worst Trude sludge of the universe. Now, Gert knew that this boy had affections for Stephanie because she sits in that living room and she watches the dynamics. So when Coy tells Gert what he had been hearing at school, Gert challenges him. Are you going to let her talk about your woman like that? She encourages Coy to beat Sylvia up, which he does. He brags frequently about being trained in judo, and he starts hitting her, throwing her around, but he's breaking things with Sylvia's body in the living room. So Gert tells him they need to take her into the basement. So Coy drags her by her hair into the basement and continues to beat her, throwing her mostly up against the concrete walls, while Gert sits on the steps and watches approvingly. In the beginning, Sylvia tried to deny that she had said anything, but it didn't matter, so she just relented to this boy's beating. Once exhausted, Gert told Coy, "You are good, but you could be better." And Coy responded that he was the best in his judo class. She reiterated that he could be better and that he was welcome to come here and practice on Sylvia anytime he wanted. She wasn't able to attend school the next day. She missed, and then it was the weekend. She returned with yellowing skin from all the bruises and with the excuse that she had recovered from her bout of the flu. She learned from other girls about makeup and often used that to cover up the many bruises. Now, Coy did come back to practice on her, but it wasn't as bad the next times when he wasn't filled with rage from the first time when what she had said about his precious Stephanie. The next lesson Sylvia learns is that she can't have friends. She had befriended a much younger girl named Anna. And, well, long story short, when she finally lets Anna come to her home after all the begging that Anna did, because Anna's, you come to my house and I want to go to your house. And so finally she lets Anna come over. Any friend that she tries to have ends up hating her, because when Gert would get the friends alone, she would tell the friends that Sylvia is talking horrible about their mothers. Okay?
My God, this woman.
To make them hate her. So the first time she brings Anna home, Gert tells Anna that Sylvia has been calling Anna's mom a whore. So this just is how it would go. And she would encourage the children to hit her in response. You're going to let her talk to your mom about your mom like that? So Anna does end up punching Sylvia for this. And Sylvia's like, I never, said that about your mom. There's a couple other teenage girls that Sylvia tried to befriend, and it ended like this as well. And I will just tell you, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it in the end, but in the beginning, they do end up getting charges for assault when all of this comes out. But they end up getting dropped because they were not only encouraged as young children to beat this girl up, but they were manipulated into it as well.
Of course.
So this happened more than once. But the thing is, not only is she being treated poorly at home, but at school, all the rumors of her untrustworthiness spreads like cancer, and even her teachers start to treat her with cold indifference, okay? Because the Baniszewski children are doing the best that they can to just spread these horrible rumors about Sylvia, okay? And then, of course, anybody she tries to befriend is then being manipulated. Yep, is turned against her, manipulated and turned against her, right? So that's making its way back to the teachers. Now I'm going to tell you a terrible story that's in the book. I call it the tracksuit story. So it was getting into colder weather. She had, for her gym class, she had shorts and a tank top. Okay. But as we are nearing towards like September, October and colder weather, she was told by the school that she had to wear a tracksuit. Well, of course she couldn't purchase a tracksuit, and Gert was not going to provide her with this tracksuit. She also has to cover up the bruises. So long story short, she stole a tracksuit she strategically picked a child that she felt could easily replace it without causing any sort of financial hardship. And no one ever caught that, she was not in trouble at school. It never came out from that child or anything that she had stole this tracksuit. But Gert noticed.
And she knew she didn't buy it for her.
Exactly. So in order to teach her a lesson for stealing, but remember, she's in an impossible position. If she hadn't wore the tracksuit, everybody would have seen the bruises. Okay. Then that would have brought noise down on Gert, and Gert would have beat her for bringing noise down on her. Right. And so, and also the gym teacher told her she needed a tracksuit for cold weather. So, she was just damned if she did and damned if she didn't. Her punishment was that, Gert took her cigarette and she put her cigarette out on all 10 of her fingers. So badly, like taking away her fingerprints on all 10 of her fingers. That's what she did. She did this with the help of the other children. They had to hold her down. Right. Okay. This isn't just Gert. These
her
are
sister all the is other, still observing all of this.
Jenny is seeing all of this, and I think doing her best to try to remain invisible so it's not happening to her too. Now, Sylvia ends up passing out from the pain of having all of her fingers burnt. But this is not enough. In the living room, in front of all of the neighbor boys that were always there, Gert threw up her skirts, pulled down her panties, and handed her a glass Coke bottle. Trigger alert.
Okay.
She was berating her about being a whore, and hands her the glass Coke bottle and tells Sylvia she knows what to do with it. But she doesn't. Sylvia has no idea what Gertrude, the worstrude, is asking her to do because she is an innocent 16-year-old girl. Frustrated that she's not complying, Gert takes the bottle and she forces it into Sylvia brutally. There's blood everywhere. She then painfully rips it from her body. This did cause permanent damage, just so you all know. It's from this that Sylvia became incontinent for the rest of her short life. She was thrown into the basement once again, and when she was checked on days later, she had defecated and urinated all over. This is going to be a reoccurring thing that we see because of that Coke bottle. She no longer has control over her urine. Okay. At this point in time, Sylvia is dying. Her body stopped healing itself. She begged Gert for a doctor, and Gert replied with, "Do you have doctor money? Because I don't." Does that sound familiar?
Her mom said it to her when her dad died in front of her.
Yep. Part 1. Exactly. She started having the neighborhood boy Coy, her own son John Jr., and another neighborhood boy named Ricky Hobbs carry Sylvia into scalding hot salt baths because her body's not, as I said, her body's not healing. They have burnt her. They have physically abused her. They've now
sexually assaulted her?
Yep, she's been sexually assaulted, and she has sores. And so as part of a punishment, but to clean her, they are putting her in scalding hot salt baths.
So it will hurt.
Absolutely. It's another form of torture. Ricky Hobbs, he knew that it was too hot, and he protested that this was not right. So, in order to keep his mouth shut and to make sure he listened like a good boy, Gert lured him into her bedroom, charming him with how handsome and strong he is, and performed oral sex on him to keep him quiet. He was very compliant after that with whatever Mrs. Wright asked, even going so far as to helping throw Sylvia's naked, wet body back into the basement just minutes after being concerned that she was going to be scalded from the hot bath. This cleaning ritual would take place whenever the mood struck Gert. And food was even less scarce. Usually she would only get soup, but Gert refused to give her any utensils to eat it with because she was a whore after all. Whores don't deserve chairs or utensils. So she had to just scoop the soup up with her hands and try to eat it that way. She was no longer allowed to wear clothing most of the time, and Gert had the household boys and the neighborhood boys scooping up her feces and urine. And at one occasion, there's a couple of different reports about this. On one occasion, she was force-fed her own urine and feces. On another, it was the diaper of remember there's a 1-year-old, the little Dennis Wright's son, Dennis Jr., was in this household this whole time too, guys. Like, we don't talk about Gert's
there was an infant
children
in there.
a lot, but there is an infant in this household as well. And so one of the accounts said that she was actually fed the contents of Dennis Jr.'s diapers. I would go as far to believing that both of those things are true, and that she was fed both her own feces and Dennis Jr.'s. The neighbors did hear things, and no, they did not do anything. This was the late 1960s. The Reverend even came to the house and was a few feet away from the basement door, praying for Sylvie after Gert told him that she'd run off to be a whore.
Okay.
But her 2-year-old older sister, Diana, remember Sylvie is
in the middle.
She's in the middle of 2 sets of twins.
Yes.
So she has 2 older sisters that are 2 years older than her. And then she has Jenny and a younger brother that are twins. So her older sister, Diana, she got letters from both Jenny and Sylvie shortly after they arrived, when they were still kind of in this honeymoon, after the first beating, but before things got really bad for Sylvie. But Diana had drama and children and problems of her own, and she threw the letters in the garbage, thinking that the girls were just being dramatic. But she was disturbed by the details of abuse that seemed so real that she didn't think Sylvie was capable of making them up on her own. Like, they wouldn't have known about stuff like that existing without experiencing it.
Right.
So she went for a surprise visit and was told by Gert at the door that their father, Lester, had forbid her to see the girls. Now, Diana knew this was not right. So she stalked out the house for hours until she saw a tiny Jenny taking out the very large garbage bin, and she talked with her. Then she called Protective Services. Of course, by the time they arrived, the whole family had a carefully laid out lie. They never went into the basement, and the case was closed.
Oh my God. They never laid eyes on her.
No.
Because they're all saying she's not there. She ran
left
away.
to be a whore.
And her sister, Jenny, obviously went along with it.
She's too scared because she doesn't want this same treatment. Then she's being threatened. She knows that she's going to be put in the basement next. You should know that this book opens up, and it opens up with Jenny hearing sounds coming from the basement, knowing it's her sister, and is scared to go down there. But she does, into the dark. And her sister tells her, "I'm dying." And there's nothing that she can do about it because she's terrified that if she speaks up and if she says anything, she'll be thrown into the darkness too. These things will be happening to her. And she's not wrong. It would. It absolutely would have. So about this time, so yes, they tell Protective Services that she had left the home to be a sex worker. And that's what everyone else in the household collaborated that as well. John Jr., Gert's oldest son, he's 14 at this time, remember, started charging neighborhood kids to come over and see naked Sylvia. They would bring her up, parade her naked and bruised body in front of everyone for money.
And this is why it's so hard, because even in that time frame, you really mean that not one of those neighborhood kids went home and told their parents or told somebody that they got to see a naked girl at so-and-so's house?
Yeah, they definitely didn't. No, not in the... No, because you don't see naked girls. That's improper. They did not... I mean, they might have told their older siblings, but they weren't going home and telling their parents.
Right.
They were just... They went home and masturbated.
Probably.
Like, they are young. These are 14 to 17-year-old boys.
So he's charging so that they can see her naked. Is she chained up?
She is...
Or she's just so ill that she's just locked in the basement?
I haven't told you this detail, but she spent a majority of her time being tied up to the bottom of the basement railings, stair rails.
So she's literally sleeping on the cement or dirt basement.
Yes, or tied, or not being able to lay down at all, being tied straight up, sometimes with her feet dangling. So if you can imagine with the circulation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Coy had started to spend more time practicing his judo now that she's naked all the time, and as much as he could without suspicion from Stephanie that maybe he was just going down there since she was naked. Gert still held strong to her sermons about the sinful ways of women and would not tolerate anyone sexually abusing her, just exploiting her for view. She does the Coke bottle thing even more horrifically on Sylvia in front of neighborhood boys again.
So she's still sexually assaulting her herself.
She is, but she will not let, no one else does. She does not let any of these boys sexually assault her. It's only her that's allowed to. And this is where I think we have the injuries that lead to her eventual death, the starting point of it. So this time with the Coke bottle, Sylvia does not give Gertrude the satisfaction of crying out. She just performed what she wanted her to and handed the bottle back to her as if it meant nothing. This angers Gert. She calls her disgusting, and she gets an idea that she needs to be branded. Okay? Now, this is the only control that Sylvie has at this point in time. She was simply just not wanting to give her the satisfaction of seeing her in pain. So, essentially, just so you know, what Gert is telling her to do is just grotesque things with this bottle. Fuck herself with the bottle. Those are her words. Okay? So she does what, without making a sound, she does what she tells her to do and hands her the bottle back. This pisses her off. So she decides, with the help of all the other children and hot needles that were heated by all the other children taking turns, she branded Sylvie with the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it."
That's a lot of writing.
Oh, yeah. And no one knew how to spell prostitute, by the way. It was a whole series of events of how to figure out how to spell prostitute, which I just think somehow is just the most moronic thing ever. Like this is the mentality that we are dealing with here. So the reason they had to take turns, they were taking turns getting the needle hot. They had to have a constant rotation of a hot needle. So there's kids heating these needles and passing it to Gert as she is branding. The beginning, it wasn't Gert that was branding. It was Coy and Paula and Stephanie. Everyone's holding this girl down. Well, and once they got to prostitute, they don't know how to spell it. So then Gert takes over. She takes part in it too. Now, Gert knows that Sylvie does not have long to live, so she's got to set up a plan because her body's not going to heal these branding wounds. She's too malnourished. So she forces Sylvie to write a letter to her parents. Now, keep in mind, this is Sylvie writing a letter to her parents, and it starts with, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Likens." Okay, not mom and dad. Like, give me a fucking break, Gert. You are so stupid. Says, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Likens, I went with a gang of boys in the middle of the night, and they said they would pay me if I would give them something. So I got in the car, and they all got what they wanted, and when they finished, they beat me up and left sores on my face and all over my body. And they also put on my stomach, 'I am a prostitute and proud of it.' I have done just about everything that I could do to make Gertie mad and cause Gertie more money than she's got.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I've tore up a new mattress and peed on it. I've also cost Gertie doctor bills that she really can't pay and made Gertie a nervous wreck and all of her kids. End quote. She was told not to sign the letter, like Sylvia went to sign it out of habit, and Gert told her not to sign it because you don't sign letters to your own kin. Okay, but you address them with their
Mr. and
formal
Mrs.?
names. God,
Instead of mom and dad?
she's the fucking worst. She tells the other kids that they will simply dump her body at a garbage dump and then let the elements take her. And then they're going to go to the police with this letter, say that she ran away with this gang of boys. Sylvia had overheard this plan. She knew, this is the end for me. She tried to make a break for it. She tried to get to the door, but was too weak. Gert caught her, raged out at her, beat her, and then force-fed her stale bread that she couldn't swallow because her throat was so swollen from all of the choking that Coy had been giving her. Not to mention she had an infection raging through her body. So she says that she can't swallow it. She's got this bread that Gert's trying to force her to swallow it. She says she can't swallow it, and trigger alert, because this is truly horrific, and I've never heard of this before, but Gert went and got an oily curtain rod, and she attempts to shove the dry bread down Sylvie's throat with a curtain rod. Yeah. When she closed her mouth against the assault, so Sylvie is trying to, not allow her entrance into her mouth with this curtain rod.
And have you ever, gagged or even with a medical device when they're sticking something?
It's awful.
Some of this is involuntary, right? Mm-hmm. Your throat's closing off. You're being choked to death. She's going to asphyxiate.
Mm-hmm. So she closes her mouth, and of course Gert just assaults her with hitting her mouth over and over and over again, yelling, take it, you whore. We are seeing...
She's getting off on this, man.
She is.
She's sexually assaulting her orally, vaginally.
Mm-hmm, so much of her sexual depravity, that is coming out. So they threw her back into the basement, and an hour later went to feed her more crackers. Sylvia's mouth was bloodied, and Sylvia said, give it to the dogs. They're hungrier than I am. This act of defiance was the last straw for Gert. She beat her over and over in the stomach, reopening the unhealed wounds of the primitive branding that she had just given her. And here's a quote from the book, which is linked in the show notes. On the next day, Gert and Coy came down into the basement together. Sylvia was still lying on the ground in the spot where she'd been left. Gert had brought down a chair from the kitchen. She rushed over and she swung it at Sylvie, but she misjudged her distance and instead smashed it against the wall. Then she snapped up a paddle and tried to hit Sylvie in the head, but her swing went so wild that she hit herself in the face, blackening her own eye. Coy watched, mesmerized by this feat of stupidity, before pushing her aside and hefting the curtain rail in his hands. He beat Sylvie all over the body with the stick, the rhythmic rise and fall of it, punctuated only by the wet sounds of impact. When they were certain she was unconscious, they abandoned her again. End quote. So this book, I want to tell you the title right now because I forgot to put it right here in my notes, but it is called Torture Mom, A Chilling True Story of Confinement, Mutilation, and Murder by Ryan Green. And like I said, the link is in the show notes. Sylvia woke with very little life left. She had a garden spade that she was hitting against the basement wall and floor to get attention. The neighbors did hear this noise, but they were so accustomed to strange noises from this household that they did nothing. It stopped about 3 a.m. The next morning, Stephanie and Ricky, who Gert was still having sex with, by the way, went to get Sylvia and put her in her last bath before they were going to carry out the plan of dumping her body and letting exposure take her. But when they put her in the bath water, her head sunk with no bubbles, and they realized they were too late. She was already gone. Exposure didn't take her. They all had. Now, there's another rendition of this as well, where they discovered in the basement that she was gone, and Stephanie was trying to perform CPR. But in Ryan's book, this was actually how it was described, that they fully put her in the bathtub, realized she was gone, and then Stephanie tried to administer CPR. Panic hit the household, and Jenny sat with her murdered sister and wondered if she'd be next. Gert made the kids take her back to the basement. They would still carry out the plan of dumping her that night. Gert just had to call the police to show them the note, and so she did. Okay? They didn't dump her body yet, but Gert called to report her as runaway as finding this note. Okay?
Kind of stupid, isn't it?
Well, yes, especially after they've already told Child Protective Services that she was, off being a whore, and her sister as well. Like, I mean, they've been, so it's just weird that, she must be gone for good now because she wrote this note. There was obvious tension when the police arrived to take statements and read the note. They were walking out the door after taking Gert's statement when they heard Jenny whisper, "If you get me out of here, I'll tell you everything." The officer realized his partner had not heard her, but he interjected and told Gert that they have to interview everyone in the house, standard procedure for missing persons. Once out of sight of Gert, Jenny simply says, "Look in the basement, they killed her." So they did. They went to the basement. It should be noted that Gert's own kids were lying, thieving degenerates of the community. She just refused to see it. One man even came knocking on the door, demanding that items that were stolen by her kids be returned to him. He knew it was her children because they were at the local pawn shop and the owner identified who brought the items in. Well, she turned him away, and he decided to take things in his own hands and broke into the house himself. The police arrived and were within inches of the basement door when this happened.
Oh, my God.
This was October 26, 1965. So when the police arrive, it was only like 2 days before Sylvie was dead that man broke into the house and the police arrived there. And we're just that close.
Yeah.
And the man wanted the house searched. He was like, I know they have more of my items. My stuff's at the pawn shop. The pawn dealers already said it's these kids. Like, search the house for the rest of my items. And they didn't. Because he went about it the wrong way. He broke into their house.
He did.
So this happens. It's October 26, 1965. I want to give you some perspective because I think you're going to be shocked by this.
Okay.
It was July 3rd, 1965, that the Likens girls first went to stay with Gert. They were only there a little over 3 months.
That's unbelievable.
Uh-huh.
Everything that happened in that 3-month period of time.
Uh-huh.
It also explains why the parents didn't come knocking on the door to drag the kids out of there, because during the 3 months,
not that much time had lapsed.
They had a visit with them.
They did.
They had some concerns, but not necessarily. And the older sister even came looking for them.
Mm-hmm. But this is how fast they were immediately depraved food. Immediately. I mean, there wasn't enough food in the house. There's a huge argument for the fact that those Baniszewski children were being neglected as well.
Okay,
they
aren't getting enough food either.
No,
so they're all deprived of food.
One had
because there's
food.
no money.
Right. No one had enough food. All of those children should have been taken from Gert long before, but this is the 60s. So it was only 3 months. She only survived 3 months of this. That's how bad and how frequently she was being beaten and deprived of basic necessities. Everyone in the household was arrested. Gert, Paula, Stephanie, John Jr., Coy, and Ricky, all on murder charges. Everyone else was arrested for assault and injury to a person.
Those are minors.
Mm-hmm. Officers throughout the city came to assist with the investigation, giving arrest warrants to everyone involved. They all immediately told the police everything they knew, attempting to downplay their own culpability as well, especially pregnant Paula. For example, in the plans that I told you about how they were going to go dump Sylvia's body at the garbage heap, and leave her for dead.
Yes.
Paula told the police that the plan had been for Jenny and John to do that. Jenny, her own sister?
Was Jenny arrested?
No, Jenny was not arrested.
Okay.
And it wasn't Jenny. Jenny, who has braces on her legs.
Kidnapped, basically, at this point, held against her will?
No, you know damn well the plan was for Paula and John, or Paula and Stephanie and John, to take her. But Paula wasn't going to give that information up.
Paula's with child.
She's going to make herself culpable. So the police used forensic evidence from the autopsy of Sylvia's body and all the witnesses' testimony and admissions to put forth the actual truth. Even the Reverend was involved, and it all comes out in the court documents.
The Reverend?
Yeah. He was aware that these children, he saw them in church. They were emaciated.
Without making any type of reports.
He made no reports. He went to the household to fucking pray for them. Gag me. I can't. Screw that guy. Anyway, Gert told the police that Sylvia was pregnant. Now, keep in mind, her own fucking teenage daughter is still pregnant. And this all escalated so fast that Paula is, she's only like 4 months pregnant at this point in time. Like, keep in mind, this was only 3 months that Sylvia was in this house. So she is still
early pregnancy. Yeah.
So what Gert tells the police is that Sylvia was pregnant. She was a troubled, degenerate teen that had fallen pregnant by a married man, and all the lies about the men that she was sleeping with and causing herself harm with. These men were abusing her.
Really, Gert? Like she didn't think that the kids would tell?
That's her defense. This is her defense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But everybody else has already told the police what they saw you do to her.
But she doesn't know that. They're all arrested.
Well, she's justifying it this way, though. She was a troubled pregnant teen who whored around.
Yep. And I have suffer from severe depression. I'm in my room most of the time. I don't know what these unruly teens are doing in my house. I didn't do any of it. I have no idea what they've been doing, as I just suffer so much with my chronic illness. That's her defense. The autopsy showed that Sylvia had over 150 separate injuries, all in various forms of healing and not healing. There were at least 100 cigarette burns on her body. She suffered second and third degree burns. There was severe bruising, muscular and nerve damage. The cause of death was multiple hemorrhages, but it was just as possible that the combined shock of all her injuries had just been too much for her weakened body to tolerate. In her death, she had bitten through her own lips, leaving them attached by only trailing threads of connective tissue. Moreover, or that was possibly the curtain rod.
And being hit how many times in the face and about her body with the curtain rod by Coy.
Yep. Moreover, all of her fingernails were broken backwards, and most of the external layers of skin upon her face, breasts, neck, and right knee, had been peeled or receded back.
Well, she'd been scalded on a regular basis.
And then beaten.
Correct.
Yep. Her throat and vagina had been swollen shut, but the examination did reveal that her hymen was still intact, and there was no rectal scarring at all. Why do I tell you this? To show you how fast Gert's story was dissolved for the bullshit that it is. She wasn't pregnant. She wasn't sleeping around like a little whore that she kept saying.
I'm surprised that didn't break her hymen, though.
The Coke bottles?
Yeah.
I know. I'm shocked, especially with all the blood that there was from it. I was really, really surprised. Both the shock she had preliminarily suffered due to the severe and prolonged damage inflicted on her skin and subcutaneous tissues, plus the severe malnutrition, were listed as contributing factors to her death. Rigor mortis had fully developed at the time of the discovery of her body, indicating that Sylvia may have been deceased for up to 8 hours before she was found. Although Dr. Cabell did note that Sylvie had been recently bathed, possibly after death.
As she was.
And that this act could have hastened the loss of body temperature and thus sped up the onset of rigor mortis. As you can expect, the trials were the same chaos that followed this family. The lesser charges were dropped against other juveniles that had been, I've been mentioning only by saying like neighborhood boys and other children, and like that one gal, Darlene McGuire and Anna, whatnot. There were some charges brought against them as well, but they were later dropped. The injury to person charges brought against the other juveniles known to have actively, physically, mentally, or emotionally tormented Sylvie. So this was Ruth Cisco, Judy Darlene Duke, Michael Monroe, Darlene McGuire, Randy Lepper. They were later dropped as well. So they were settled on murder charges for Gert, Stephanie, Paula, John Jr., Coy, and Ricky. Those all stuck. They're all charged with murder.
Okay.
I will tell you, though, that Randy Lapierre smirked while on the stand, admitting to hitting Sylvia at least 40 different times at the encouragement of Gert. And I'll also tell you that he died at the age of 56 in 2010. But he testified. I mean, the charges against him ended up being dropped.
Assault.
And he went state's witness.
Okay.
And he went on to say
that it's
Gert,
the smirk that gets me.
It's the smirk that is mentioned in not only Ryan Green's book, but all other documents.
This evil piece of shit was able to manipulate these young children's brains to the point where they justified these actions.
And then even while testifying on it, still
showed no remorse.
Right. He's smirking while he admitted to hitting her at least 40 different times. That's why I felt it relevant to mention that he's no longer with us and really didn't live a very long life. He died at 56.
It could have been shorter.
Paula had to leave during her testimony to give birth to her child, a daughter that she named Gertrude after her mother.
That makes sense.
Isn't this gagging? It's just wow. Fucking wow.
So
your mother, you're on trial for murder.
Paul isn't going to be in prison, right?
Yeah. We'll get to it. The trials went as expected.
I want someone to take her baby from her, Charnell.
Oh, the baby got adopted out.
Good.
Don't worry.
Because name it whatever you want, but I want you to lose your baby, ma'am.
Gertrude, baby Gertrude gets adopted out.
Good,
Paula does not raise that baby.
She killed somebody else's baby.
She did. Yes, she did. She actively participated in killing somebody else's baby. The trials went as expected. Everyone diminishing their own culpability, and the prosecution calling the plethora of witnesses that they had to completely rebut what they had said. Some witnesses were even adults in the community who admitted to seeing the signs of abuse and emaciation and doing nothing. Gert testified that she spanked the girls only twice. It was the unruly teens that did the rest of the abuse. She had no control over them because of her own mental health issues and depression. What really didn't help, though, was her daughter Marie, who at the time of the trial was testifying for her mother's defense. She broke down on the stand, saying, "God help me," and admitted to lying for her mother and for taking part in heating the needles that her mother used to brand Sylvie, completely undoing her mother's testimony at that point.
Okay, she's only 11 when this happens.
At the time
of the trial, she 13, 12?
Encroaching 13.
Yeah, but she was a baby. I mean, she was 11.
Mm-hmm. The trial of the 5 defendants lasted 17 days before the jury retired to consider its verdict. On May 19th, 1966, after deliberating for 8 hours, the panel of 8 men and 4 women found Gertrude Baniszewski guilty of first-degree murder.
You mean Mrs. Wright?
Yeah, Mrs. Wright, recommending a sentence of life imprisonment. Paula Baniszewski was found guilty of second-degree murder. And Hobbs, Hubbard, and John, so that would be Ricky and Coy, okay? Ricky, Hubbard, Coy, Hobbs, and John Baniszewski Jr. were found guilty of manslaughter. They were the minors. All 3 of them are minors. Upon hearing Judge Rabb pronounce the verdicts, Gertrude and her children burst into tears and attempted to console each other, as Ricky and Coy remained impassive. On May 25th, Gertrude and Paula Baniszewski were formally sentenced to life imprisonment. The same day, Ricky Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, and John, I apologize because I think I might accidentally said their first and last names switched the sentence above.
Okay.
So, sorry about that. It's Ricky Hobbs and Coy Hubbard. And John Baniszewski Jr. each received sentences of 2 to 21 years to be served in the Indiana Reformatory. Paula appealed and was granted a second trial.
Wow.
Because on grounds that they wanted, they couldn't have a fair trial because the judge denied them to have the stay of location. Okay. And they were all tried together.
Right.
So
that caused some problems back in the day because you can motion for a murder to be tried separately and it would need to be heard on that. And then the judge just has to make a really good record to explain why you would continue to do one together. This is a case where there are multiple defendants to the same murder. I would have had it done. I don't know that I would have separated it.
Yeah. They went ahead and gave her a second trial, but before it went to trial, she made a plea admitting to voluntary manslaughter.
Okay, she was looking for a plea all along too.
She served only 3 years on that charge before she was paroled.
Really? But she lost her baby?
She did,
Good.
and it was adopted by somebody else.
Just need some punishment that hurts for longer than the 3 years she spent to have happened to her.
Oh, I have more on her. After her 1972 parole, Paula Baniszewski assumed a new identity. She worked as an aide to a school counselor for 14 years at the Beeman Conrad Liscombe Union Witten Community Schools in Conrad, Iowa, having changed her name to Paula Pace and concealing the truth regarding her criminal history when applying for the position. She was fired in 2012 when the school discovered her true identity. This is why Michigan has such strict fingerprint laws in child care, you guys. Paula married and had 2 children. The baby daughter with whom she'd given birth to while awaiting trial in 1966, whom she named after her mother, was later adopted. So, the murder charges initially filed against Gertrude Baniszewski's second eldest daughter, 15-year-old Stephanie, were ultimately dropped after she agreed to turn state's evidence against the other defendants.
Including her mom.
Mm-hmm. Although prosecutors did resubmit their case against Stephanie before a grand jury on May 26, 1966, the decision to later prosecute her in a separate trial never materialized. Stephanie Baniszewski assumed a new name and became a school teacher. She later married and had several children. Stephanie, I'm going to say it wrong, Circustad, was last known to have resided in Florida. When questioned at trial as to her motive for turning state's evidence, Stephanie simply stated, quote, "I'm just here in the hope that I can help anybody," end quote. In response to her mother's attorney's question of why are you here, her mother's attorney then said, "Including yourself?" Yep, including herself.
Yeah,
that is 100% why she turned state's evidence.
Of course. She's also, I have to remind myself.
She's 15.
She's 15.
Mm-hmm. So went on to be a school teacher.
You
don't think that she murdered anybody else. I mean, I hope.
And that's an acquittal.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't have any type of a charge that would stop her from getting a job, you guys. That's the terrifying part about it that I wish everyone would take into consideration when making plea agreements.
A lot of therapy and exercised the demons of her childhood and could recognize.
I mean, this is the 60s, but what about assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder? What about the fact that you took part in these beatings, like a felony level assault? So there's something to follow these children.
And this is not.
I'm having a hard time because to me, children exudes a level of innocence when you use that word.
Yes.
And you and I are preservers of children's innocence for as long as we possibly can. And sometimes I still even think people in their young 20s are children, right? In terms of
course.
Development.
Especially mentally, yeah.
But it's the evilness. It is knowing what is right and wrong despite how you've been raised. And from what I've heard, even though they were little vile thieves, because remember,
for survival,
sure. They haven't been exposed to this type of torture before.
This is what I wanted to say to you guys. This is not a case of, I have to do this to this child or this is going to happen to me. These kids were not physically abused. She doted upon these children. She clearly physically neglected them. With her own mental illness and depression, because she wasn't providing for them.
But she was neglecting herself. She wasn't eating. Right. She was living in filth too because of her mental illness. So
she was not providing for them, but she also was not abusing them like this. Okay?
No, they picked a person out who was seeking a safe haven in their home to destroy out of jealousy, rage, her own self reflection. Like, she saw her.
She did. She absolutely did.
Self in her.
But she didn't have that bond, that emotional bond with them that she has with her children.
No, and she hated herself.
Yes. So I'm just pointing out that, yes, in a lot of times in these child abuse cases when the siblings have taken part of it out of fear, that's not the case here. This was not out of fear for it happening to them. None of this stuff had happened to any of them prior to this. And this wasn't a sibling. So let's talk about Ricky Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, and John Baniszewski Jr. They all served less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27th, 1968. Richard Hobbs died of lung cancer on January 2nd, 1972, at the age of 21.
Holy shit.
Less than 4 years after his release from the Indiana Reformatory, Ricky Hobbs died. That's the one that she was having sex with at the age of 14 to keep his mouth shut.
Apparently she was giving him a lot of cigarettes,
too. Chain smoking, yep. In the years between his release from the Indiana Reformatory and his death, he is known to have suffered at least one nervous breakdown. I mean, yeah, he was sexually abused by this woman at the age of 14, plus all the other things. Following his 1968 release from the Indiana Reformatory, Coy Hubbard remained in Indiana and never attempted to change his name. Throughout his adult life, Hubbard was repeatedly imprisoned for various criminal offenses, on one occasion being charged with the 1977 murder of 2 young men, although largely due to the fact that the chief witness to testify at his trial had been a convicted criminal acquaintance of Coy, who admitted to have been in his company at the time of the murders. He was acquitted of this charge. So he went to trial again for murder, but was acquitted.
And this is this kid
yes,
was violent as a child. He's the judo kid.
He is the judo kid. He's the kid that I told you, even though he's a kid, he's 15. We can hate him right now.
Yeah. He took joy in harming people.
He did. He was described as a sexual sadist the rest of his life as well. And say bad dude. He was fired from a lot of jobs. Actually, shortly after the January 2007 premiere of The Crime, drama film, An American Crime.
This was on it? This was covered?
It was. He was fired from his job. He died of a heart attack in Shelbyville, Indiana on June 23rd at the age of 56.
Okay. Shelbyville's not far.
No, he also died at 56. Like, okay, we're seeing a pattern here.
That's all up to the big guy or gal upstairs.
John Baniszewski Jr. lived in relative obscurity under the alias John Blake. He became a lay minister, frequently hosting counseling sessions for the children of divorced parents. Several decades.
That's what went wrong.
Several decades after his release from the Indiana Reformatory, John Baniszewski Jr. issued a statement in which he acknowledged the fact that he and his co-defendants should have been sentenced to a more severe term of punishment.
I think I might like him the best.
Yeah, he agreed.
Well, he went on to study religion and to become a pastor or a lay pastor. And again, not forgiving his actions, but maybe he actually took some time to self-reflect about the wrong that he did and the fact that they weren't punished like they should have been.
And he did add that young criminals are not beyond rehabilitation, and he described how he had become a productive citizen. He died of diabetes in the Lancaster General Hospital on May 19th, 2005 at the age of 52.
Young again.
Yep.
Well, complications for diabetes are no joke.
Right. Prior to his death, he had also occasionally spoken publicly about his past, readily admitting that he had enjoyed the attention that Sylvia Likens' murder had brought upon him, and also claiming to have only ever hit Sylvia once. So
no, but he was participatory in scalding and torturing her on a regular basis. So why do we give a fuck about one assault?
Also, remember, he's the one that actually charged the neighborhood boys to make money off her naked body.
So the sexual deviance that was involved there as well. So maybe he took some accountability, but he's still minimizing.
Yeah, exactly. And whoops, I just kicked the table. Sorry if you heard that.
I don't know how. I've never heard this story.
I know. It's intense. In September 1970, the Indiana Supreme Court reversed the convictions of Gertrude and Paula Baniszewski.
No.
On the basis that Judge Rabb had denied repeatedly submitted motions by their defense counsel at the original trial for both a change of venue and separate trials. Thus, this ruling further stated that the circumstances regarding the prejudicial atmosphere created during their initial trial due to the extensive news media publicly surrounding the case impeded any chance of either
a fair trial.
appellant receiving a fair trial.
I know. And, as a jurist, if somebody made the motion for separation of a trial, I said I wouldn't earlier, but with that number of defendants, once one person is inculpatory and you think they're guilty, any brilliant defense attorney or even a mediocre one's going to say, yeah, that just made my clients' chances of being found not guilty go out the window. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're going to give them a new trial at this point.
Yeah, they were retried in 1971. On this occasion, Paul Baniszewski opted to plead guilty of...
Paula?
Paula. Remember, of voluntary manslaughter.
Okay.
Remember, I had told you that already. So she was sentenced to serve a term between 2 and 20 years.
Right.
Okay.
And then got to go to Iowa and live her life and have kids.
Yep. Gertrude, however, was again convicted.
They did try her again.
They did. Yep. And, by the way, I forgot to tell you this, but Paula did try to escape from prison in 1971.
And she still only had to serve 2 years.
Yeah, she was still released in December 1972.
Do you remember that story I told you about the sausage ghost of New Orleans?
Yeah.
And he escaped multiple times, and once he just decided to not come back to prison from getting the mail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they still gave him parole and let him out.
Right. They're just like, oh yeah, I mean, of course you're going to try to escape from prison. It's hell here.
Oh,
I don't know.
Right, clearly.
My gosh, she tried to escape in 1971, and by December 1972, they're like, yeah, you're good for parole.
Since you want to leave so bad, we'll just let you go.
We're going to let you. It's fine. So Gertrude Baniszewski was convicted of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced again to life in prison. Over the course of the following 14 years, Gertrude Baniszewski became known as a model prisoner at the Indiana Women's Prison. She worked in the prison sewing shop and was known as somewhat of a den mother to the younger female inmates.
Well, she always has liked to manipulate young children.
Yes, and she's always been a good mom, so she thinks.
Wonder if she raped any of them with bottles.
Not sure. Becoming known to some within the prison by the nickname Mom. Remember how she likes to be called that? By the time of Gertrude's...
It's more of a Norman mother tone.
By the time of her ultimate parole in 1985, she had changed her name to Nadine Van Fossen, which is a combination of her middle name and her maiden name, and described herself as a devout Christian. News of Gertrude's impending parole hearing created an uproar throughout Indiana. Jenny Likens and other immediate family members of the Likens vehemently protested against any prospect of her
Jenny
release.
lived this shit.
Yes. The members of 2 anti-crime groups also traveled to Indiana to oppose her potential parole and to publicly support the Likens family. Members of both groups initiated a sidewalk picket campaign. Over the course of 2 months, these groups collected over 40,000 signatures from the citizens of Indiana, including signatures obtained from outraged citizens who were too young to contemporarily recollect the case, in addition to former inmates who had become acquainted with Baniszewski during her incarceration and who described her as a cynical con artist.
Yep.
Who had never expressed remorse for her crime. They got signatures from people on the inside, you guys. All signatures.
Which just means not everyone could be manipulated. So those stories of how she was a
den mother.
Yeah, it didn't apply to everyone.
Well, she only always applied to the weak-minded.
But she always did pick her favorites too.
She did, and she knew the weak ones that she could manipulate. All signatures gathered demanded that Gertrude Baniszewski remain incarcerated for the remainder of her life. Within her parole hearing, Baniszewski stated her wish that Sylvia's death could be undone, although she minimized her responsibility for any of her actions, stating, "I'm not sure what role I had in her death because I was on drugs." It's the first time that's ever coming up, by the way. "I never really knew her. I take full responsibility for whatever happened to Sylvia."
Are you fucking kidding me?
That was her statement to the parole.
That's not taking accountability. That's not going to fly with most parole boards that I know now.
Well,
that's not.
This is 1985. Taking Gertrude's good conduct in prison into account and the parole board marginally voting in favor of granting her parole, she was released from prison on December 4th, 1985.
How old was she?
She was born in 1928. Oh, yeah. So Following her 1985 release from prison, she relocated to Iowa. No surprise, because that's where Paula is.
Oh, yeah. 2 peas in a pod.
Mm-hmm. She never accepted full responsibility for Sylvia's prolonged torment and death, insisting that she was unable to precisely recall any of her actions in the months of Sylvia's prolonged and increasing abuse and torment within her home. She primarily blamed her actions upon the medication that she'd been prescribed to treat her asthma. And yes,
albuterol is terrible for memory and it makes you homicidal even.
Apparently. That's bad news for all the millions of people that are on it.
Me included.
Gertrude lived in relative obscurity in Laurel, Iowa until her death due to lung cancer. Remember, she was a chain smoker.
Yeah, her and her 14-year-old boyfriend.
On June 16th, 1990, at the age of 61.
Welcome home. You say from hell.
Right.
Satan opens his loving, fiery arms.
One of my mistresses
my child
is home again.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Let's try to take some comfort in that she only got 5 years of life on the outside before the Dark Lord took her forever.
Right. I need to know. Please tell me you have some information about her family.
I'm just getting on to Jenny.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you so much.
So Jenny Likens later married an Indianapolis native named Leonard Reese Wade. The couple had 2 children, although she remained traumatized by the abuse that she had been forced to watch her sister endure. For the remainder of her life, Jenny was dependent upon anxiety medication. She did pass away of a heart attack June 23rd, 2004, at the age of 54 in Beech Grove, Indiana.
Okay.
I know. 14 years before her own death, Jenny had viewed Gertrude Baniszewski's obituary in a newspaper. She clipped the section from the newspaper and then mailed it to her mother with an accompanying note reading, "Some good news. Damn old Gertrude died. Ha, ha, ha. I'm happy about that."
Good for her.
Elizabeth and Lester Likens died in 1998 and 2013, respectively.
Oh, they lived a long time.
They did. They did. The years prior to her own death, Jenny had repeatedly emphasized that no blame should be attributed to either of her parents for placing her and Sylvia in the care of Gertrude Baniszewski, as all her parents had done was naively trusted Gertrude's promise to care for the sisters until their return to Indiana with the traveling carnival. The house at 3850 East New York Street, in which Sylvia had been tortured and murdered, which was also Dennis Rice's house, by the way, stood vacant for many years after her death and the arrest of her tormentors. The property gradually became dilapidated. Although discussions were held about the possibility of purchasing and rehabilitating the house and converting the property to a woman's shelter, the necessary funds to complete this project were never raised. The house itself was demolished on April 23rd, 2009, and the site is now a church parking lot.
Okay.
And that is where I leave you for this gruesome 2-part.
Wow, Charnell.
Right? Right.
Well,
Sylvia.
I'm almost at a loss. I'm so glad that her story was told again.
Yeah.
Like, we need to keep talking about this young woman who, God, talk about
she
innocent.
She was so pretty, too. I'm so innocent.
I mean,
yes.
You woke up in the middle of the night because your dad's abusive. Mom just wants to get you out of it. Your whole life, you're transient because you're traveling with a carnival, right? Uh-huh. And that's a whole different episode, like the life of these traveling professions, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sylvia's life up to the point of going to live with Gertrude is probably its hectic own thing.
But she was always loved and taken care of. She
was, yeah.
I'm not sure why Mom picked just those 2 girls. Well, the older 2 girls were out of the home.
The older 2 girls, they were 18. They were married. Okay. They were having children of their own. Okay. And the boys were... I actually didn't mean to say older 2 girls. She had 2 sets of fraternal twins.
Oh, it was a girl and a boy.
So it's a girl and a boy both times for the twins.
That's right.
But there's 2 older, okay? And then there were the 2 younger. Both of the boys traveled on the carnival with them because they could pick up all of the heavy things. Yeah. Yep. So,
and this guy comes to get his wife out of jail. I can't imagine that went well, but this isn't about that. I mean, she was trying to escape him, and then he just says everything that's going on. and you found this nice, lovely lady. Can you just keep an eye on these girls for the next few months and keep them safe? And we'll pay you $20 a week while we're making money. And yeah, I can see where she would tell people not to blame her parents.
Yep. So they're dropped off in July, and by October 26th, Sylvia had succumbed. Yeah. Awful. And I too was really shocked that we have had this case recommended. I mean, Jasmine recommended it to us, but I know other people have too. They've mentioned it anyway, that it would be a good case for us to cover. So hopefully,
and then you read a book, and when you read a book, we get multiple parts of content.
Yes.
So okay.
Yes.
We can both bathe, I think.
We can. I do want to shout the book out one more time. If you guys are wanting to read all of the things, of course, I don't put every single detail in, but it's called Torture Mom, A Chilling True Story of Confinement, Mutilation, and Murder by Ryan Green. I mean, I got it on Amazon, my Kindle, the new Kindle my husband had bought me. So, yeah. Okay, are you ready for a bath?
Yeah, the one you're going to bathe us with isn't like super bathy.
Okay, it's not, but
You felt like it went along with the story?
I feel like this obituary, something like this should have been written about Gert. Okay, but a listener sent this to us on Instagram and was like, hey, here's a brain bath if you want. You know how sometimes we read funny obituaries, which I think you have for me?
I have one. I mean, It's a little sad, but it's also funny.
Mm-hmm. This one is just straight truth, okay? This obituary, and it's just from March 5th, 2025, so that's just last month. It says, Nick succumbed to a life of drugs, Marlboros, fast women, and Ford Broncos. He is survived by 3 daughters, none of whom know how they will get by without dad calling to ask for $20 for cigarettes and methadone one last time. And that's all it says. And I really just feel like Gertrude's obituary should have read something similar. Like Paula's the only one who cares that she's gone.
Yeah, we reap what we sow, right?
Yeah.
When you read an obituary like the one I'm going to read you, which is quite lengthy, by the way, but you'll enjoy. It's just fun when you know that you have people, your loved ones, who they're going to tell the truth for what it is, even if it doesn't always make you look good, but he was clearly loved.
Okay, sure. Mine could go that way.
I think possible both of us. So this is Chris. It says, Irishman dies from stubbornness, whiskey. Chris died at age, and I'm not saying his last name, at age 67 after trying to box his bikini-clad hospice nurse just moments earlier. Oh. Ladies' man, game slayer, and outlaw, Chris told his last inappropriate joke on Friday, December 9th, 2016, that which cannot be printed here. I'm going to use his last name because it was 2016, and the whole obit uses his last name as Connors.
Oh, okay.
Anyone else fighting ALS and stage 4 pancreatic cancer would have gone quietly into the night, but Connors was stark naked drinking Veuve in a house full of friends and family as Al Green played from the speakers. The way he died is just like he lived. He wrote his own rules, he fought authority, and he paved his own way. And if you said he couldn't do it, he would make sure he could. Most people thought he was crazy for swimming in the ocean in January, for being a skinny Irish Golden Gloves boxer from Quincy, Massachusetts, for dressing up as a priest and then proceeding to get into a fight at a Jewish deli. Many gawked at his start of a career on Wall Street without a financial background.
Oh, my Lord.
But instead, with an intelligent, impish smile, love for the spoken word, irreverent sense of humor, and stunning blue eyes that could make anyone fall in love with him. Oh. As much as people knew hanging out with him would end in a night in jail or a killer screwdriver hangover, he was the type of man that people would drive 16 hours at the drop of a dime to come see. Aww. He lived 1,000 years in the 67 calendar years we had him because he attacked life. He grabbed it by the lapels, kissed it, and swung it back onto the dance floor. At the age of 26, he planned to circumnavigate the world. Instead, he ended up spending 40 hours on a life raft off the coast of Panama. This guy's crazy.
Wow.
In 1974, he founded the Quincy Rugby Club. In his 30s, he sustained a knife wound after saving a woman from being mugged in New York City.
Wow.
He didn't slow down. At 64, he climbed to the base camp of Mount Everest.
Holy shit. That was only a few years before he died.
Throughout his life, he was an accomplished hunter and birth control device tester with some failures. Notably, Caitlin Connors, age 33, Chris Connors, 11, and Liam Connors, 8.
Oh my gosh, no.
He was an older dad.
He was
a rare combination of someone who had a love of life and a firm understanding of what was important, the simplicity of living a life with those you loved. Although he threw some of the most memorable parties during the greater half of a century, he would trade it all for a night in front of a fire with his family in Maine. His acute awareness of the importance of a life lived with the ones you love over any material possession was only handicapped by his territorial attachment to the remote control of his Sonos music. Chris enjoyed cross-dressing, a well-made fire, and mashed potatoes with lots of butter. His regrets were few, but included eating a rotisserie hot dog from an unmemorable convenience store in the summer of 1986. Of all the people he touched, both willingly and unwillingly, his most proud achievement in life was marrying his wife, Emily Eyre Connors, who supported him in all his glory during his heyday and lovingly supported him physically during their last days together.
Oh.
Absolute Vodka and Simply Orange companies are devastated by the loss of Connors. A celebration of life will be held during happy hour at 4 p.m. at the York Harbor Inn on Monday, December 9th. And then in lieu of flowers, to please pay open bar tab or donate to Connors Water Safety Fund at... And it lists the thing.
I love that. I would have liked to have known him.
We might.
He did live 10,000 years in his 67 years.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think that if you only get 67 and you know that you have maybe a sentence there at the end, what with his complications, you live it.
You do.
You live it.
I think
live
so.
it every fucking day.
Oh, God.
I love Chris Connors.
Also really love whoever was witty enough to write that and put all that detail of his life.
Did you see that of his 3 children, the oldest was 33 and then the youngest were 11 and 8?
Yeah.
So I bet the 33-year-old daughter and maybe his loving wife wrote that.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you for that. That was perfect.
Well, we needed to cleanse.
We did. We did. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you would like to support us more, feel free to join Patreon. If not, we understand. You can keep listening each week. Our
general audience episodes are fantastic too.
For sure. So, all right. Thank you all so much for being here. And we hope that you keep it curious.
And keep listening.
Till next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.